everyone, to the Adjusted for Risk podcast from the shores of Lake Tahoe. I'm Ryan Nauman and the host of the Adjusted for Risk podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Zephyr, the award-winning technology for advisors, wealth managers, financial analysts, and investment professionals. Zephyr has been the industry leader in investment analytics since 1992 and is the tool I turn to whether I'm looking to uncover investment trends, conducting manager due diligence, building an optimized investment portfolio, or searching for a top performing manager who scores well in a certain sustainable investing metric. So with that, this is the perfect segue to our opening act. I'm very excited to have on Randy Jones, who is the Director of Product Strategy at Zephyr. So that makes him the mastermind behind the award-winning Zephyr. So first, Randy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. To let you know, you are the very first guest of the Adjusted for Risk podcast. So thank you. So now you can set the bar very high for all future guests. So with that, Randy, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first off, thank you for inviting me, Ryan. It's very exciting that we have the podcast for Zephyr moving along, and thank you for hosting these. It's been a pleasure, joining. Hopefully we'll see where the bar ends up, but maybe one bar will lead to another bar.
Or the bars that maybe we like to frequent after work, right, on a Friday afternoon.
So we just have to define bar, but no, it's I've been very fortunate. I've spent the last 28 years in the investment management industry. Last 22 of those years for investment management software firms. So I spent 12 years with PerTrack Financial Solutions. We were very ingrained in the hedge fund and institutional space, so there was a great learning experience and in bringing quantitative and risk analysis software to a rather large industry there. Then worked with for eVestment for 4.5 years on their product strategy team. Still really focused on the institutional space, and now over 3 years working at Zephyr, bringing our new common platform, our Zephyr platform, to fruition, which again is kind of a culmination of all of our core legacy applications into one common platform. That's on the business side. You and I live in an area that is just one of the most spectacular places on earth for outdoor activity. So in addition to having, a role that I love, we actually also have the life balance component where we can kind of match that up with quality of life.
Now, I second that, Randy. I always, whenever we're out and say we live in Lake Tahoe, everyone's like, wow, we're very fortunate to live in a place like this, but don't tell anyone that. There's enough people here already. We'll keep that a secret. So that's great. Thanks for the introduction. So when you consider both of us really have been in the industry for over 20 years, I don't know if that's good or just ages us a little bit, but albeit our experiences are different sides of the industry. We have experienced a lot of changes in the financial services space. Can you describe what has been the primary drivers of the changing landscape?
Well, probably the most change we've seen has been in the last probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, you and I have been, as you say, in this business a long time. And even when we started investing, there was only really one word that ever came up, and that was diversification. Mm-hmm. That it only mattered to be diversified. And, the late 90s, everybody was, flying high on tech. Then the tech bubble burst. And then everyone started scrambling, looking for, all right, now what do we need to do to protect ourselves from something like this again? And then the hedge funds took off because there was this perception of diversification. And then, so it was really more around reacting to the historical events over the last 20 years. Empirical evidence then showed that assets classes became more highly correlated during extreme events, not less. Then, the fight was on for finding new vehicles. We have derivatives on derivatives on derivatives on derivatives on mainly, stocks and bonds, but instruments have always come into play. Someone will always be innovative and come up with some vehicle built off of something. But what we've seen in the last 4 years, especially with COVID, is really a whole change in behavior, not just diversifying. Risk and mitigating risk, achieving your performance are still two of the highest variables that are used in the investment management space, and always have been. But now we have personal goals, professional goals, changes in lifestyle that now come into play, where purpose is really another variable in the mix. So we've seen a change mainly over the last few years with the pandemic, and people really thinking about not just performance and risk, but what's going to make me happy in life. This pandemic, we've seen as vehicles that were predominantly institutional for years are now open to the wealth management space. But all of that really has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. And environmental, social, and governance was a focus for institutions 10 years ago, but has now a big focus of the different investors now than it was. So I think a lot of the change, behavioral investment types and vehicles have really come about in the last few years, whereas the previous 15 was pretty stuck on diversification.
Those are some fantastic points, Randy, that you just brought up about behavioral investing. It's such a polarizing topic, right? Because my upbringing and the view and how I view investing in money is a lot different than yours, right? And your goals and objectives, and not only that, but your values and what you believe in is different than mine. So it can really make it challenging for a financial advisor or an analyst or an allocator to create portfolios for each individual person, right? Because everyone's beliefs and goals and objectives are so different, and it's so behavioral and emotional investing can be. So I'm really glad you brought that up in terms of how it's changed from, really just, when we started, it was all about returns and risk, trying to get as much return for little risk as possible. And now, don't get me wrong, that's still the primary player here. But when you roll into emotions in behavioral investing, it brings a whole nother element to this space. And with that, we're talking about challenges. You talk to a lot of advisors, analysts, allocators every day to try and uncover some of the biggest challenges they face. So you and your team can create a solution that solves those challenges. Because of all those conversations, you have a really good understanding of the challenges and obstacles that financial advisors face today. So what challenges do you hear most frequently during those conversations?
Adaptation. So depending on the resource, and even speaking to some of our clients, the average age of the advisors today, I've seen anywhere from 55 to 65. And when you look at the kind of the demographic of the investors, you've got, I guess, the traditional sort of the World War II era, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And you have an older advisory element. And how do you adapt to the changing behavior, adapting to behavioral changes like you say, there's no one size fits all. Adapting to new investment vehicles, like we just mentioned, adapting to new technologies available that is changing rapidly as well, and adapting to new ways of engagement with our client's client. They want their data when they want it, where they want it, how they want it. So you're crossing over generations. There are so many different aspects that need adapting to in this process. Building trust is definitely the key, and again, because I've kind of experienced this with, not just family members, but, advisors in general, where, it's going to be about listening, not talking. It's going to be about asking, not telling, and coaching, not managing. So I think the biggest challenges is going to be adapting to those 5 components that I just mentioned. And just the way that the engagement takes place between the advisor and their client, which could cross generations, will be a challenge in itself.
Yeah, that's another great point. It's like we're starting to come up with a trend here in this conversation. And, obviously it's how you interact with different cohorts, right? The older generation, they wanted to meet in person, right? The younger generations, those millennials, they want everything at the tip of their fingertips, right? On demand. They want information 24/7. At all times, they want to be able to get data and information. So financial advisors, they have to adjust to how they, like you said, communicate to their clients. And I think technology, and we're looking, we've adapted here at Zephyr. You talked about it at the opening about doing a podcast. I think financial advisors in this space, in order to connect to this next generation of clients, they have to put themselves out there. They have to get out there, whether that's through a blog or podcast, leveraging social media and leveraging technology. Whether you don't want to change through technology, it feels as if it's very important to connect with that generation, like you said, to use technology, whether that's through a podcast or a social media. So some great talking points to remember there. So, we've talked a lot about the evolution of the financial services space, really over, I mentioned 20 years, but you've really narrowed it down to really over the past 4 years. But there have been numerous challenges that investment professionals have faced, like you said, over the past 2, 4, 5 years, and really, like I said, 2 years with the pandemic. But these challenges, I believe, also present opportunities for advisors who are proactive and accept the challenge. Can you discuss some of the opportunities that advisors face today?
Since the pandemic, I think what we call this what we call the great opportunity era for advisors in the next, say, 5 years. The wealth transfer we may not have seen yet, but there's a significant number of individuals in, Gen X, millennials, who have reached, a point in their life where they're looking for help. We've seen an increase in just folks reaching out to advisors. When the pandemic started, all of a sudden you start thinking about your future, where you want to actually live. What type of planning do you need to do? What type of goals? Even the younger, my daughter, are asking questions about long-term care, when the pandemic hit. So things that, our generation, or, certainly the next generations, really don't give much thought to, really require the expertise of advisors who are available to coach them through that. So I think, like I said, we haven't really seen the great wealth transfer, but we know that will happen. There's a lot of wealth that, to the next generation, that is a great opportunity. They have the challenges in how the advisor will engage with them, but there will be a huge opportunity to, capitalize on that market. Unfortunately, I think I was at a conference earlier this year that had kind of an odd statistic, from a research firm that, stated that 70% of the children of say the patriarchs and matriarchs had not been contacted. Now, some of that is due on, due law or, on purpose, but there's a huge opportunity there, existing family members for sure, but we've seen an increase in just the need for help. The pandemic escalated, just people from all of these, kind of like say cohorts or generations, really rethinking what's important to them in life, and then how many components there really are to that, and reaching out for help on that. It isn't just about investment management anymore. That's just one component. But that's where the coaching comes in, more frequent engagement comes in. We'll probably talk about how that engagement will take place and what we see down the road. But we see this as the great opportunity era where, I think there's just going to be a great market and folks who are really going to be needing help, who are looking for help.
Couple things there, a lot there. Number one is you mentioned you can kind of live wherever, and it goes back to your opening statement about living in Tahoe. Fortunate where keep it quiet.
The word's gotten out.
For all the people that are watching, all the hundreds and thousands of people watching this podcast, now they're gonna all be driving the Tahoe.
Dreams come true, and you may need help to reach these dreams, but that's the mindset that folks are, at least from talking to advisors, and that is the new paradigm.
You bring up a fantastic point. And, before really the pandemic hit, we talk a lot about robo-advisors, right? Robo-advisors were really a huge disruptor. And I think they still are a disruptor in this space. But with what you just said about, increasing your touch points to your clients and reaching out to them, talking to them more, and clients needing that, being coached. They need that, as a financial advisor, you need to be more of a coach now with everything going on. Robo-advisors, they don't have that human touch. Do you think we're getting to a point where maybe robo-advisors are kind of losing some ground here, and clients are going to, because of the pandemic, are going to be focusing more on the human aspect of financial advice?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the one variable that is not going to go away, is that human contact, human advice. From what I know from speaking with advisors and reading, that was never going to, robo-advisors were never going to replace the face-to-face contact. The technology is changing such that advisors have technology that can lower costs, that can, speed things up. So if you look at what robo-advisors bring, it's the technology, doing it where you need it, when, where, and how you want it, on your tablet, on your phone. So it was just a new technology that made it very easy to engage, to open, engage, trade, costs came down. But that's great from the technology perspective, but what if you have a question? What if you don't even know what to do? Yeah, you like all the wow factor, all the cool stuff that you can do with a robo-advisor app, but you don't have that experience of an advisor, and the coaching is a big component of that. So human beings, I don't think that human component will ever go away, and we can streamline the process, which is happening. We can automate the process. We can certainly move to AR and VR and that kind of cool stuff, but always having that coach available to you, and really working with you, again, not just in an investment management, being a true coach on many aspects of people's lives. No, I don't see that ever replacing the advisor.
That's a good point. And I often like to look back at, we have these market cycles. You also have business cycles, economic cycles. And a lot of these disruptors like robo-advisors, they were created, their infancy started during what was the largest bull market in history, right? The largest and steepest following the great financial crisis. Well, during that time, you hate to say this, but markets were easy. Getting returns were easy. So robo-advisors, if you start during the biggest bull market in history, chances are you're going to have a good run during the first part of your creation, until of course you hit, shall we say, something hits the fan, right? And then all of a sudden you hit a crisis. Then we actually see how people react, and we get back to behavioral investing. And I think that's what we're getting at. Before, I like to see whether it's a investment product, a manager, or a company like a robo-advisor, a product. I like to see how they perform during a full market cycle or economic cycle before you really jump in with both feet. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Like you said, I think investors are realizing after the pandemic, well, it's like, I need, there's only so much technology or AI can provide. I need a coach. And that's why I find there's a great opportunity here, like you said. So you've talked a lot about the future. You mentioned that I always kind of, maybe a wild prediction here for this space, but is there anything that maybe I don't want you to give away any secrets of what you have in store for Zephyr over the next couple of years on your roadmap, but do you have any wild predictions in this space for maybe over the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't, if I had a crystal ball, I mean, if you look at the technology and, there are those who are researching the metaverse cyberspace currently. Will there be a new digital economy at some point in the future? I do believe that successful engagement of advisors with the next cohorts coming up will be more dynamic engagement. We've talked about it, my goal of killing the PDF, more animation, more augmented reality in the way that large amounts of what was typically complex data, just around the investment management space can be, presented and much more engaging, even gamified going forward. I don't know how we define that yet, but with the speed with which innovation and augmented reality and virtual reality and smart homes and smart cars, we'll have self-driving portfolios. But I think down the road that this metaverse, if it does come to fruition, there are a lot of powerful tech companies who think it will, this digital economy in cyberspace, whether we get there or not. But I think components of that, cyberspace will be instrumental in how our clients engage with their clients over the next 5 to 10 years.
Great.
And again,
I think
whether it's the presentation, whether it's the vehicle, we have cryptocurrency, NFTs, but you're going to start seeing probably any type of digital investment that will take off. And to your point just now, with the robo-advisors, younger generation just buying crypto. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. Everything's going up, and then what happens when the bottom drops out and you lose 40% of your investment? Then they wish they had an advisor that would have kept them kind of on an even keel.
Yep.
At that time. But yeah, I think going forward, the crazy idea, given that this digital phase is going to continue, whether it's in a digital economy, digital assets and new vehicles, and how those are actually presented and engaged with our clients and their clients is going to be much more dynamic than paper.
Right. You kind of worry me when you bring up the metaverse, Randy, because we keep bringing back Tahoe. Living in Tahoe, the last thing I want to do is just be stuck in my house. You want to be outside and doing stuff, and it's like, oh gosh, are we going to be stuck in this metaverse of virtual reality?
There's the virtual world, augmented reality. But again, it's depends on how our client want to engage.
Yeah.
And where, want to go out mountain biking, then we keep it in the physical. and we can engage while we're mountain biking, while we're paddleboarding, while we're golfing. But given the focus on digital, we never want to lose that human touch again with the outdoors, with each other. But with the push into the digital space, I think that'll be a big, and just way again, the animation, the tools with which people will use to engage, we'll still have the human contact, but
well, you really went full circle there, Randy. I think that might be a good place to bring you into a fun subject, but you said the space, financial advisors, you said it at the beginning and you just said it there. They have to be adaptive. They have to be able to adapt. And you just said it there. In the future, if your clients want to communicate through augmented reality or however it may be, you must be willing to adapt, because just meeting in the office quarterly or sending you a fax isn't working anymore, right? So you have to adapt. So I think that's going to be my biggest takeaway. And you're seeing here with the podcast, typically we just do a blog, but we're adapting here to the time. So with that being said, Randy, let's move along to something a little bit more fun, our last topic. So I recently heard or read this question. I thought it was a really good question. If you could only ski at one resort for the rest of your life, where would it be? Now, before you answer, you cannot say your home resort of Palisades or what was formerly known as Squaw. So if you could pick only one resort, where would it be?
And I can't choose my home mountain?
You can choose your home mountain.
Well, for context, so for the rest of my life, so Alpine Meadows, which is owned by Palisades Tahoe, is where I met my wife for the first time. I met her the first time in 1983, and we've been together ever since. That is our home away from home. It's where our kids started skiing before they were 3. It's our mountain. So Jackson Hole will be right behind that. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to ski in some beautiful places, but given my relationship with Alpine Meadows, that's the one place I will ski for the rest of my life. But I'd have to say Jackson Hole was right there if we didn't have Alpine.
Well, all right, I'll let you have Alpine based on the background, based on that backdrop. I'll let you have Alpine. Mine, I think, now I haven't skied as many places as you have, but I would have to say mine would be Big Sky up in Montana. I'm a big fan of it.
Good choice.
Big Sky was a lot of fun. It wasn't maybe because it's a little bit harder to get to, Bozeman. And I was a big fan of Bozeman too. If, that would be on my short list of places to move would be Bozeman. But Big Sky is probably one of my favorites.
Well, that is a tough one. I mean, with Colorado, I know we're so fortunate, in our backyard. But yeah, that's a tough question, Ryan.
It was supposed to be a fun. Question. It was supposed to be a fun question, Randy, not the toughest question.
No, mine's hands down.
That's good. Good to know. That's a good story. So with that, I think that's a great place to end this episode. I would like to thank you, Randy, for joining this episode. It has been a lot of fun, great conversation. So everyone, please remember to follow us on the Adjusted for Risk YouTube channel and A Wealth of Insight from 6,237 feet website. And lastly, you can listen to this podcast at the same location that you listen to all your other favorite podcasts. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you, Randy, and thank you everyone for listening, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Ryan.